Hello everyone, I'm Chinny, a PhD student at the University of Illinois, and today I'm going to be presenting a project I worked on with my advisor, Professor Zilles. Our project is titled Students' Perceptions of Fairness and Security in Version Exams. One thing we've noticed is that enrollment in computer science is increasing, not just in the US, but in other countries as well. And one problem that has come about as a result is test administration. So instructors need to be able to administer tests at scale, and proctoring is not necessarily very efficient because you need more proctors for larger classes, otherwise students might be able to cheat. So one other strategy that's been proposed and been used is versioned exams, where students get different copies of an exam to prevent them from being able to collaborate and cheat. However, this randomization leads to procedural justice concerns, and procedural justice is a component of organizational justice, which deals with whether students think they are being treated fairly in the classroom. So procedural justice specifically refers to the procedures that are being used to make decisions for students. As an example, it could be the procedures that are being used to get grades or to decide grades. In this case, the procedure that you're using to decide grades is the different questions that the students receive. So there might be concerns about the fairness of that. And the purpose of our work is to explore this tension between security that you get from having versioned exams and the fairness of actually having different questions on exams. So here are the two main research questions we address. We address students' perceptions of the trade-offs between security and fairness, and we also address what factors contribute to students' perceptions. Here is a brief outline of our project. We'll spend some time on the qualitative and quantitative section. For our qualitative section, we'll be looking at students' comments in detail and what students' opinions were. Our study took place at a large university in the United States, a Midwestern university, and we had about 450 students. So the survey and the data collection and analysis happened after the 4th exam out of 6 exams administered in the class. And the reason we actually conducted this was that we had some concerns about the fairness of the exam. We'll show some plots later that explain why we had concerns, but students had also complained slightly that they did not believe the exam was completely fair. So we decided to conduct a survey and take a closer look at the issue. Here is the data for the exam. So there were 2 questions on the exam. Students could receive 1 question from the first pool and 1 question from the second pool. For instance, I could get a question asking me to implement a stack, and I could also get a second question asking me for a pre-order traversal of only even 3 elements. And the questions were assigned randomly to students. So here we have some plots showing performance on the questions, and this led us to believe that the exam was actually unfair. You can see on the left plot, the mirror question had significantly worse performance than the Q or the stack questions. Students who got the Q questions scored in the 80s, while students who got the mirror questions scored much lower. Fortunately for question 2, there were no significant differences in performance among the 6 variants. So after the exam, we administered the survey to ask about students' opinions on fairness and security. We did offer a small amount of extra credits, and because there was extra credit for completing the survey was not anonymous, so that could have affected who responded. We had about 335 students who completed the survey, and we got both free response answers as well as Likert scale responses. One thing that was very interesting that we noted was that a majority of students ascribe high importance to exam security. You can see on this plot that over 50% of the distribution is 5s, 6s, and 7s. So the students had said exam security was very important to them. That's something to keep in mind for the rest of the talk. One thing we did, one innovation that we've done above what previous work has done was to look at students' comments in details, and we use grounded theory to generate code. So this is a method where you don't start with a preconceived hypothesis. You look at the data to form your theory and to get insights from the data itself. Two researchers coded up the responses. So they coded the different comments that students had given, and there was about 75% agreement. We ended up coming up with 81 codes that characterized the student responses. So we will refer you to the paper for more details about the codes, but here are some examples. There were some recurring themes that we saw from the codes, and we've listed the 7 recurring themes. We've highlighted 2 of them that are particularly pertinent to this presentation and to the conflict we saw in the class. So we saw different groups of students who had different priorities. Some students were more security-minded, while others put higher weight towards fairness. So you can see that some of the themes indicated that as well. And we've also included comments that show some of the differences in what students prioritize. In order to do qualitative analysis, what we did was to break up students into distinct groups. We had 4 groups that we broke students up into: the status quo, the unfair, and the mixed and neutral. So the status quo group had indicated that they were satisfied with the way the exam was currently being administered. The unfair group had indicated that they were not. They had complaints about the difficulty variance. So they said that some of the questions had different variance in difficulty, or they had some other complaints. The mixed group had some positive and negative comments, while the neutral group made comments that were orthogonal to dichotomy here. So they had indicated comments, but not necessarily about fairness or security of the exam. After we broke students up into these 4 buckets, we proceeded to see if there was a relationship between the question that students had received and the sentiment that they expressed. So we actually did not find differences in sentiment based on the Q1 variant received, but we found differences for the Q2 variants. What we have here in this column is the mean performance on each question, and we've also plotted that in the chart on the right. So you can see the 6 rows that we have, and if you look at the rows, the distribution of sentiment is the same, irrespective of which question was received. And this is surprising because we would have expected the mirror question to have more students complaining about unfairness. Since the mirror question was tougher and people scored worse on it, we would have expected to see more complaints for the mirror question, but we actually did not see that. Surprisingly, however, we saw that difference for the second question. So even though the performance on the second question was roughly equal, no one variant was much harder than the other. We did see a difference, however, between the non-null in order and the positive pre-order. So those 2 variants, students had different sentiments about them. And as you can see, the students, about 15 students had said that they were satisfied with the status quo for the non-null versus 32. So almost double the number of students, or actually over double the number of students said they were satisfied with positive pre-order. So this leads us to believe that differences are not based on actually receiving a harder question version, but on something else. So we wanted to see if the sentiment group was correlated to the overall performance in the class. And what we found was that those who were satisfied with the status quo with the way exams were currently being administered, they actually did significantly better than those who said that it was unfair and those who had indicated neither preference. Those who had done mixed, the performance was close to those who had said maintain status quo. So there wasn't a significant difference between those 2 groups. Okay, so what we noticed was that the students who complained didn't actually receive a harder question version. And some students, because of this, we believe some students may be blaming the testing procedure unfairly. Or it's possible that because lower performing students might be more sensitive to slight variations in difficulty. So any small difference that captures maybe a different nuance in skill, they could be more susceptible to it since they are on the boundaries. So that's something interesting that we think could be happening in this case that leads to the result that we found. And some limitations of our study: the survey respondents differed significantly from the non-respondents. As you can see from the plot on the right, the people who completed the survey did significantly better than those who did not. And this was a very surprising finding. It could actually have some consequential results on our findings, because it's possible that maybe the students had different criteria, or the students have different opinions about version exams in general. And our survey was designed to get opinion on the general test administration. So when we had designed the survey and given it to students in the semester, we weren't thinking of necessarily examining the tension between security and fairness. So the questions were not the best at getting students' opinions about those two particular issues.